Hello everybody, Scotia here, and welcome to a new era of Street Fighter, because finally, after months of leaks and rumours and countdowns and hints and teasers and everything else in between, we finally have had our first look at Street Fighter 6. It was just announced the other day, and while there's a lot to unpack with that reveal trailer, this video isn't really about that. If you want to see and hear my thoughts on Street Fighter 6, on that trailer and how it looks and everything else around that, please check out the video at the top of the page. That's where I went over everything, all my thoughts and all that. So go check that out if you want. You can check that out and then come back here if you so desire. Because this video is about the roster. Because as we enter a new era of Street Fighter, we also enter a new era of speculation. As is the case with every newly announced fighting game, the immediate question becomes, who are we going to be playing as? And with Street Fighter, that becomes a tough question thanks in part to the vast amount of characters and playstyles that represent multiple facets of this legendary series. And to put it simply, there's no right or wrong answers here when it comes to who should and who shouldn't make it into the next Street Fighter game. Everybody is viable, but with that said, I need to get some caveats out of the way in regards to the proposed roster in this video, just to clear up any possible confusion or rage that may arise from my choices. So first off, I just want to clarify how many characters I'm going to be having in my speculative based roster, and I'm going with 22 characters because quite frankly, I don't think 16 is enough. I don't think it was enough back in 2016 when Street Fighter 5 came out. I think it's very limiting in terms of what characters can make it. And I think, for a full price game, I think we as the players and the buyers, I think we deserve more than that. And I'm choosing 22 because at the end of 2016, Street Fighter 5 had 22 characters. And that was the initial 16 base roster combined with the 6 Season 1 DLC characters. And I feel like by the time the last character, Urian, came out in 2016, I feel like Street Fighter 5 was in a good enough spot to have launched in. But I've always felt like Street Fighter 5 should have launched in September of 2016. I feel like it would have been received far better. I feel like it would have had more features at launch. It just would have been an overall better product. And I think a big part of that is because 22 to me is a much better number than 16. And I feel like that is a good enough number to launch with. I feel like you get enough characters in there that you can please a lot of people. Not everybody, because you'll never please everybody. But I think it's a good number to start with. And I would go 24, but I think, I think 22 is decent because of, how that's the number that Street Fighter 5 ended its first year at. 20 I think is also a good spot to go at. I think 20 to 24 is the sweet spot. If we get a number between there for the final game, I'll be happy. But I definitely don't want 16. I think 16 is just not enough. So yeah, that's why I'm going with 22. Number 2 is that this is not a gameplay focused channel, and I am not a gameplay focused person. My focus is mainly on the story and characters. So as a result, you will not see a lot of popular characters with popular playstyles in this list. I'm sorry, that's just how it goes. I have nothing against those characters or those playstyles, it's just a case of I either don't want to include them or I don't think about including them. So it's nothing personal, it's just the way my list went. Following on from that leads us to number 3, where I have to warn you that as someone who is more focused on the story and characters, that's where the general direction of this list is going to end up going. I know not a lot of people care about that type of stuff, but I do, and I couldn't help my list leaning towards that over gameplay. So just bear that in mind when you see a character on this list and think, why is that character in over this character? Because I focus more on the story. So that brings us to the final one here at number 4, where I feel like this is probably the most obvious one, but I expect to be wrong on most of these choices. I obviously don't know where Capcom is going in terms of the story and the roster. This is just a mixture of speculation combined with my own personal tastes. So don't walk away from this video thinking this is exactly how I plan this roster to go, because I don't. It's also worth mentioning that for this roster, I'm basing a lot of my choices on the idea that this game is set after Street Fighter 3 Third Strike in the timeline, so characters and what they do will relate heavily to the events of that game, as well as the end of Street Fighter 5. So with all that out of the way, it's time to finally start my speculation for the base roster of Street Fighter 6. We're going to do this by obviously adding the 2 characters we know about already, so let's add Ryu and Luke to the board. These were 2 characters we knew were going to make it, so there's no surprise here in seeing them be the first 2 characters revealed for the game. Ryu appears to have spent a long time training since we left him in Third Strike, no doubt under the watchful eye of the Senjutsu Master and Hermit Oro. Luke meanwhile looks to have embraced the path of a wandering fighter since bidding farewell to the military and Guile.
Come on, let's turn up the heat!
for our first edition, I'm going with a safe yet expected choice, so welcome everyone's favourite player 2, Ken Masters, to my roster for Street Fighter 6. Ken will have finally taken Sean Matsuda in under his wing following the events of Third Strike, and will juggle training his new student and his family while also hoping for another rematch against his old friend Ryu. For his design, I'm thinking of going for a more traditional looking Ken, but with a twist. I enjoyed his redesign in Street Fighter 5, but I think sticking with something a bit more instantly recognisable might help Ken recover from his often mocked appearance in that game.
Your words are not needed.
Following Ken is someone that we all know as the Emperor of Muay Thai, Sagat. After having had a taste of the Dark Do and the power of nothingness in Street Fighter 5, Sagat sets out to meet up with his old rival Ryu, who has now learned to master the art of Muno Ken since their last encounter.
Wanna see my kung fu? I'll show you.
For the first of the characters introduced in Street Fighter 2, Chun-Li makes her inevitable appearance in Street Fighter 6. After vowing to devote her life to running an orphanage and teaching children following Third Strike, Chun-Li leaves retirement when a new threat begins to rear its head and once again threaten the world. Chun-Li is an incredibly safe pick, there's no way she misses this game, right?
You can't escape!
No need for talk. Let's do this.
Next up is Guile, who also joins the roster of Street Fighter 6 to face whatever evil remains in the world, while potentially meeting his former soldier Luke in the field of battle. I don't expect a lot of Guile to change from Street Fighter 5, except for him maybe being more at peace due to his closure at Charlie Nash's death. Perhaps he could look to the future and take Luke under his wing? Despite having him in this roster, I do think Guile can be easily replaced by anybody else, maybe Cammy or somebody else from Street Fighter 2.
My iron body is invincible, so beware!
Zangief returns in Street Fighter 6 to spread his love of wrestling and muscle spirit across the world. I think we could see an older and more greying Zangief in Street Fighter 6, who still holds his passion for wrestling and his motherland. While he wouldn't be my first pick for Street Fighter 6, I think Zangief would be a welcome addition to almost any roster.
There is no way you could ever knock me out!
Having spent the last 2 years focusing on movies, Fei Long grows desperate to return to his martial arts roots and runs out on a lucrative movie contract to sink his teeth into street fighting once again. I can see Fei Long having more of a flashy yet formal design in Street Fighter 6, maybe something close to a Street Fighter 4 alt costume. I think we could use a World Warrior that wasn't present in Street Fighter 5, and personally I'd love to see Fei Long back.
What's the meaning of fate? You shall know.
Rose makes her return in Street Fighter 6, where she hopes to prevent the oncoming calamity involving G, and also free herself from the time loop she has trapped herself in. I originally had Manat returning in the base roster, but felt like Rose had more to gain from the story than her. I also thought about shifting the dynamic they had from Street Fighter 5, where the student appeared before the master, and figured Manat would work better as DLC.
Uh-oh! Pleased to meet you!
Having set out the events of the Street Fighter 3 series in order to try and live a normal life, Sakura Kasugano cannot resist the call of battle any longer, and heads out into the world in order to find her icon Ryu. I used to have Karine in this spot, but figured Sakura would have a more interesting story in terms of trying to find and meet up again with Ryu after having not seen each other in so long.
Okay, let's rumble.
Leading the charge of returning Street Fighter 3 characters is none other than its hero Alex. A new man since his clash with Gill and now Ryu, Alex has developed somewhat of an obsession with defeating the fabled warrior and has now spent the time since their last encounter training in preparation. While I unfortunately think Alex's stock went down a bit following his rough appearance in Street Fighter 5, a game that follows on from Street Fighter 3 in the timeline absolutely needs to feature its former star player. Making his return to the series after 22 years, Sean Matsuda dunks his way into Street Fighter 6 as the student of Ken Masters. No longer just a mere copycat, Sean has further honed his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Tatsuken and basketball techniques while under Ken's tutelage in order to finally create his own unique fighting style. I think every base roster needs that one shocking return of a character we haven't seen in years, and I'll always throw my hat in the ring for Sean when it comes down to it. I think he'd make a great addition to this roster.
I'll show you my dance. You ready?
Elena returns for Street Fighter 6, where the ongoing threats to the Earth inspire her to try and liven up the world by making friends with as many people as possible. I originally had Ibuki in this slot, but I felt like Elena deserved it more due to her missing out on Street Fighter 5. Dudley or Makoto could have taken this spot too, but I can see them better as DLC.
Harmony. That is the truth of what you must seek.
Gill returns in Street Fighter 6 as the Emperor of the now public Secret Society, deciding to no longer be bound to secrecy following his fight with G. Gill uses his secret art of resurrection to escape an assassination attempt by his brother Urian, and decides to investigate Alex and G in hopes of learning more about his fabled prophecy. Gill is a character I have doubts about making it into Street Fighter 6's base roster, but I felt like his importance in Street Fighter 3 and confrontation with G in Street Fighter 5 make him a worthy addition.
Yes, that's right. Understood.
After spending many years tracking down the truth behind the mysterious man known as Q, Crimson Viper finds herself tracking down the mysterious G in the hopes of getting some answers. Viper was one of the more shocking absences in Street Fighter 5, so I definitely feel like she's earned her spot here. As for her design, I like something similar to her bodysuit costume from Street Fighter 4, but I wouldn't be opposed to the suit and tie.
Well then, where do you want me to break you first?
Juri returns for Street Fighter 6, where she once again keeps to the shadows. I honestly didn't plan at all for Juri to be in this base roster, but I wanted a second Street Fighter 4 character, and honestly couldn't think of one that I either wanted or thought would work. For Juri though, I hope they go back on everything they did with her in Street Fighter 5. I really think that was probably one of the worst handlings of a popular character in a sequel I've ever seen.
Well, ain't you a high-def picture of strength? I'm shaking here.
Joining the base roster of Street Fighter 6 is Ed, who leads his band of Rebel Shadaloo experiments to help the weak and stand out on their own away from M. Bison. Ed was clearly being built up for bigger things in Street Fighter 5, so his inclusion here was obvious for me. That said, I really hope they rethink the Neo Shadaloo uniforms.
I am Rashid of the Turbulent Wind. Remember the name well.
Though he avenged his friend's death and stopped Shadaloo's plan of taking over the world, Rashid still sticks close to the world of street fighting along with his butler Azam. Rashid was a great character that was introduced in Street Fighter 5, and though his story is relatively complete, I'd love to see him back in Street Fighter 6.
I'll fight this battle. Why? Because it is my duty.
G was a major character towards the end of Street Fighter 5, so his return in Street Fighter 6 should be no surprise. Who is this mysterious man, and is he really the villain everyone assumes him to be? I guess we'll have to find out in Street Fighter 6. From here we have 3 more spaces left, which I'm going to use for new characters that will debut in Street Fighter 6 for the first time. Given Luke was clearly meant to debut in this game, I'm including him as a Street Fighter 6 character. As for the new characters themselves, I'm not going to even entertain the idea of guessing who they might be. They could be anything from pre-existing characters to completely new concepts. Regardless, I'm interested in seeing them. So this is my fully completed speculated base roster for Street Fighter 6. As I said at the beginning of the video, I do not plan on assuming anyone in this list is guaranteed for the game, outside of the usual staples. However, if I ended up being even 50% close to what the real base roster ends up being, I'll be happy. That said though, what if I was given the opportunity to bump this roster up to 24 characters? I did say the sweet spot for the base roster was between 20 to 24, so who would I add if I had 2 more slots?
Round 1, fight!
Well, first off, I'd add the highly requested Sodom to Street Fighter 6. As one of the last Street Fighter Alpha characters left to make it into a 3D game, I think his return would definitely turn some heads. Though his addition may seem random in terms of the story, I'm often reminded of how Birdie in Street Fighter V was added to that game's base roster as a way of adding some comic relief, so I think Capcom's first weeaboo can fill that spot well.
It's so nice to meet you.
For my second choice, I would add Colleen from Street Fighter V to the base roster of its sequel. While it may seem like an odd choice, I think Gill could use an ally in the game, and I quite enjoyed the version of her depicted in Street Fighter V. That said though, I could easily replace her with someone else like Necro, Abel, Eagle, Dulcim, or any number of characters that I unfortunately had to leave out of this base roster. And with that, my bonus base roster speculation is complete, and I leave you with the completed board to look at and critique in the comments below if you so desire. This was honestly a lot harder than I thought. I must have changed characters around about 20 times up until the moment of recording this video, and that was with the extra 8 characters I gave myself. I don't think I could whittle down a roster to just 16 characters, there's just too many to choose from. However the base roster turns out though, I'm extremely excited to see how Street Fighter 6 shapes up in the coming months. With this drastic new change in art style, the anticipation of seeing characters return is raised even higher with their new looks in the RE engine. For now though, we'll just have to wait until the summer to see what else Capcom has lined up for us. I have some more videos for Street Fighter 6 planned, such as what I would like from the game, but until then, I'll leave things here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.
We await your return, warrior.